Hey, welcome into Strictly Speaking. Good to have you. I'm Bob Frantz. Today we're going to talk about your rights and my rights and free speech and whether or not it's allowed to happen in this country anymore, whether or not it's allowed to happen around the world. It's a global problem. So we're going to try to enlist a global solution here. We're going to go across the pond, as it were, and bring in Mark Sutherland. Mark is a filmmaker, a free speech activist from the UK. He's bound and determined to protect and preserve civil liberties, both in Europe and here in the States. And he makes his voice heard on podcasts and by way of his own YouTube channel. And today, his voice will be heard right here on Strictly Speaking. Mark Sutherland, greetings from the States. How are you doing over there in the UK, my friend?
I'm very well, Bob. Delighted to be with you, and thank you very much for the privilege of inviting me. Thank you, sir.
Yeah, I'm less than delighted. I'm less than delighted right now because I'm very, very worried, Mark. At the time of our conversation, we're about 3 weeks away from a presidential election that is going to impact not just me and the people here on this side, but over where you are as well. As a matter of fact, I think it's quite an astounding thing, the number of people who are interested in the outcome of the American election because of what it's going to do to them in their countries. Um, I just I came across a video a couple days ago of an MMA fighter, a Brazilian fighter, MMA fighter, who after his bout was having his post match interview, and rather than talking about himself, he screamed for the Americans. Dylan, see if you can pull that up. It's on my Facebook page. I think it's on my Twitter page too. It'd be really fun to watch here. But Mark, he's a Brazilian, and during his post-match interview, instead of talking about what a great thing he just did and so on and so forth, he started shouting at the Americans to not let happen to America what happened to his country. I think you just passed it. I think you just passed it. There you go. There you go. Bring that up here and turn the volume up and let's listen to him. I put this on TikTok a couple of days ago, and it's got some 85,000 views and 20,000 likes now. People were really, really taken by this. Let's listen to this, Mark, and then I'll get to my first question for you. Go ahead.
Look, I don't want to talk about names. I don't want to talk about names. I don't like to talk about politics. But I would just say one thing. Now, Venezuela and my country, Brazil, is on the bad situation because the government is fucking left. And if you guys want the USA, don't be there. Stay right. It's Trump! 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 For God!
So, Mark Sutherland, that's what I'm talking about. Here, I have talked to people from communist countries, socialist countries, and this guy is right in line. They have seen the crumbling of their countries when they see this far left radicalism taking over their governments into socialism, and they see it happening. The same things they watched happen up in, up close and personal in their countries in South America or in Europe or in Asia, the people I've talked to, and they see it happening here in the United States, and they're saying, don't be like us. Don't be like us. For God's sake, if you crumble, none of us are going to be safe. That's the message I got from that guy, and it went viral.
Absolutely, and Brazil is a very interesting case because it was Bolsonaro who was called the Brazilian Trump, and then Lula, I believe, was in jail as a far leftist. He's then released, and then he ran in their election and then won it. And just as a little anecdote, Bob, in London, I remember driving through London, and there were these people celebrating Lula winning. And I did a double take and thought I need to find out about this. And then, of course, he's an extreme leftist. And I think recently, last few months, Michael Schellenberger went down there as the now very much free speech activist and had moved from the left, the perceived left. And because he went down there as a free speech activist, the Brazilian authorities weren't very, very happy about that. Fortunately, he was fine when he went down to talk at a rally, etc., because he's got a name. So it's not. I'm joining these dots up because I think what you raised is absolutely powerful. Venezuela, Venezuela at one not that long ago was a beautiful country. It was the extremely wealthy and together, and then because of the socialism, communism, it's now in the mess that it is in, Bob.
Yeah, it was one of the wealthiest countries
Mm.
in Central America, Latin America, and it was and now people are eating dogs, roasting them over trash cans. I mean, if they can catch them. I mean, it's crazy. It's unbelievable how far it's falling. So let's follow up on that a little bit. My point here was that the rest of the world is watching very, very closely this coming election, and they're watching to see what direction we turn. I think most of the world knows about Kamala Harris and what her background is and what her ideology is. They know what Donald Trump has done because he's already been president for 4 years, and they're watching to see what direction America chooses because of the direct impact it's going to have on them. Why don't you speak to that from the UK? What kind of an impact is the American election going to have on the UK or on Europe as a whole?
Well, the first thing I'd like to say is that how socialism and communism, I think, works in so many different countries at times, or how it comes about, in many ways, is very, very different. You're going for either a violent revolution like the Bolshevik Revolution, or I believe in our case, Fabians. Fabians who want to completely take over a country, communist mindset, but without having a violent revolution. It's technocracy, and I believe that's what we are now facing in the UK. What it means is the president of the United States, Bob, has always been seen as leader of the free world. Now, when Trump was elected in 2016, when he came down the escalator in 2015, that is when it triggered. It began to unveil the fact that we have puppet masters behind the curtains. Some of us have known about that. If you go back to books like Global Tyranny Step by Step, written by Bill Jasper of the New American, and others, and other people have been studying American politics, the fact that you've got the UN there and all the rest, it's true. There is a deep state per country. There is this push to create a utopian dream led by the UN. So what impact does this have? When Trump run, and hear me, I'm not saying he's my messiah, he's not. But the fact is when he
Okay,
was
because we're not voting for a new Messiah. It's
no, we're
okay.
not. We're not. And the bottom line is this. The bottom line is this. There are two choices. If we are being given a period of grace again, we are either looking at a full-blown Marxist, people that really don't care about the American people. They just want power. They want control. We only have to look at the Jan 6 prisoners from J621. We only now have to look at what is unfolding, sadly, in Tennessee and North Carolina, and the incompetence where they do not get in there and help the American people in great need at this moment because of Hurricane Helena. There is, Bob, Trump showed us when we voted to leave the EU with Brexit. It then spurred. Many people have talked about this. It then spurred the Bannon and the Trump. Bannon with the Trump campaign for Trump to win. It began to expose the global control, and populism really came in with our Brexit vote, and then with populism with Donald Trump coming in 2016. And I agree with you. We are standing on a precipice. You are standing on a precipice where basically they want to rip up the Constitution of the United States. You know as well as I do that Barack Hussein Obama talked about, and supposed to be a constitutional lawyer, talked about the fact that it was ebb and flow, the fact that the Constitution was alive. Well, I always thought it was written down on a piece of paper, and that was it. It's not going to move. Bob, finally, I'll say this: unless all those people that have fled communism that now live in America, and many of those are way in their late 80s, early 90s, and they could talk about that. They talk from experience. When that experience is not listened to anymore, and people think that the democide that happened in the 20th century of a minimum of 100 million people, whether that's through Mao, etc., people have forgotten that. And it's America that has always been seen to stand against that as this bulwark. Now, and Khrushchev said it, we will never have to take America by a gun, because behind every blade of grass, I mean, there was a Japanese general said this, is an American with a gun. But Khrushchev said we'll be able to spoon it out from the inside by challenging the ideology. And as you have said, the whole march through all the institutions as Mao would do. And there are people greater than me that talk about this. This is where we are at, Bob. And the reason why I am looking on with bated breath, and many other countries, many other friends of mine, friends who are in Australia, New Zealand, etc., that we're all looking on, because the tyranny the tyranny is at the door. No matter what, there are a number of things that we could talk about, Trump and all the rest, but there's only two choices. Do you want to quickly go down a tyrannical road, or do you want a period of grace where you can hold some of that back and allow the rest of us to personally circle the wagons, regroup, and find each other again? Because that is what's actually going on within Europe. There are movements, conservative movements, populism, popcorn, etc., to actually do that. Because for us in the UK, Bob, we've got Brexit maybe in name only. We haven't really fully left. We need to leave the European Court of Human Rights, etc. And really, you need, I mean, the amount of Exocet missiles I would get for saying this, you need to leave the UN. The UN is a globalist construct. If you go back to Eleanor Roosevelt, you go back to all the founding of that, and this is where we're at. We need to come out. And now with the UN going on about the Global Future Pact, and we have just had our Prime Minister referring to that. We've had our Foreign Secretary referring to the global order. Well, what is the global order? The global order is coming under the United Nations, the step-by-step to global tyranny. And the United Nations then undermines the Constitution of the United States. Unless people understand how you were founded, your history, and of course, you have been under attack for that for a very, very long time. They have wanted to bring America down. So it means, I cannot say it enough, for those of us that are awake, for those of us that care about free speech, for the life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness within our own countries, this is such a 5th of November for the election this year is a huge, huge moment.
Yeah, that's a very good summary, Mark. And you know, the U.S. notwithstanding, and whatever happens here, let's reverse things for a second here. I'll tell you what it looks like over there from our vantage point on this side of the Atlantic. We always have been able to count on, to some extent, Western European democracies as being free and fair, and maybe not the exact same thing as the American Constitution, but they have embraced freedom, particularly since World War II, and they've enjoyed, the people who have lived in Western European nations have enjoyed some of the same comforts that we have here. I am seeing far too many news stories about what is happening in the UK, what is happening in Germany, what is happening in France, what is happening in some of these. I'm not even getting anywhere near Eastern Europe and what's happening with Ukraine and Russia and threats of Poland and everything else, but just staying where we've kind of always been. When we go on a European vacation here from the States, we're not going to Russia. We're not going to the Middle East either. We're going to where you live. And now, from what I understand, it might not be a very safe place to be. We might not be able to enjoy any of the freedoms that we thought you guys used to have there if we come on over now. So give us the 30,000-foot view, if you will, of what is happening to freedom, including and especially speech, as it is in jeopardy here. How is it being? How much tyranny are you enduring over there?
Well, put it this way. So the the Prime Minister Keir Starmer is a member of the Trilateral Commission. No one is discussing that on mainstream media. That's another globalist route. What they don't want the populace. They don't want the masses, frankly, voting. They want people to be disaffected and then to create the technocratic tyranny where they are telling us how much we can drink. Can we smoke? I'm not encouraging smoking from a health point of view, but it's saying this kind of thing. We now have a situation where if you, and I'm against it, you disagree with abortion, and there are abortion clinics where young girls would go, or women would go to then have an abortion. You can't protest outside that. You can't pray outside it. There will now be exclusion zones, which means if your house is incorporated in that exclusion zone, and if you are then a Bible believing Christian and you do not believe in abortion and you decide to hold a prayer meeting in your house, that is now questionable according to the Scottish administration. So we'll just throw that out for a start. How that will pan out, we wait and see. You've seen there was a woman that was arrested in England for praying outside an abortion clinic. Praying, you can't even pray in your own mind. So we've then got thought crime and all this kind of thing. We had, I believe, our own, and again, Exocet missiles come in, but I think we had our own Jan 6 moment. If people are under the illusion that this present government that has just come in, Keir Starmer, does not have relationships with the Biden administration, then I have a bridge to sell you. And also the ideology. So suddenly we have had 27,500 illegal immigrants come into Dover on the channel at the bottom of our country, where in 1944 brave Americans landed on Normandy when we floated over the Mulberry Harbours. So let's just throw that out. We were going one way to release Europe of tyranny, and then look at what's coming the other way. There is huge political reasons for that. We've got time, I'll try and explain. So we've got 27,500. We now have,
before you, yeah, I was going to ask you
gonna say,
where are these 27,000 coming
well,
from?
the 27,500 are coming over from France. They've come from many countries. They've come over from other African countries. They've come either through Italy, through Germany, landing up in France and saying that they are refugees. Then they are getting in inflatable boats, and it's important to say that about the countries that they've come over, because if they were true refugees, then they would declare asylum in the country that they first went into. So it's looking at Europe. So they've been coming over on inflatable boats. We have
This is
gangs.
identical to what we face. This is
Precisely. Now, we have got over 70,000 and climbing of these illegal immigrants in hotels up and down this country. Now, our country fits into Texas 2.5 times. You are the third biggest landmass in the world. That does not mean that you can assimilate the amount of illegal aliens, which I believe, as J.J. Carroll and Ryan Matter's film about treason, what is treason, talk about, it's far more than 11 million. It's far more than that. And we all know what Homeland Security is doing in regard to encouraging that. So what does that mean for us? It means that it's a classic cloud and pigeon. We can't pivot. We cannot afford this. And they are not going to stop this. Bob, just quickly, they've just released a contract that people can bid for to house these illegal immigrants. And when you say about free speech, it's the fact that there had been that awful stabbing incident in Southport near Liverpool, where a 9-year-old, an 8-year-old, and a 7-year-old who were at a Taylor Swift dance class were stabbed to death, other children injured, 2 dance teachers who were taken there injured, and then brave people as they were trying to protect the girls, and another man went in there doing the same. People had had enough. So suddenly that erupted because of the fact that the police were not upfront releasing what had actually gone on. And to be honest, it's still, the various answers are still not there. But people had had enough. You don't have people going in stabbing, these children in this particular way. So to me, the way and I am not condoning bricks being thrown at police officers in this country. I'm not. However, when people are arrested for saying things online on memes and all this, and some of them weren't appropriate, but they're being arrested for that. And Bob, finally, we have with prison numbers are so off the charts that there was no more room to put people in cells, so they released certain prisoners, and one particularly has then gone on to repeat a crime very, very, very quickly, maybe even two, to then put people protesting about illegal immigration, people that had absolutely see that they have had enough on the direction of the way the country is actually going. So this is playing out. Then what it means is that they wish to crack down on social media. The European Union doesn't. That's why they keep having a go at Elon Musk. They don't want. They would actually, if they had their way, they ban Twitter. Ironically, Meta is complaining about the fact that it doesn't have free access to Europe at the moment, and Meta is run by an ex-politician over here called Nick Clegg, who's a total Remainer, believes in the European Union and all the rest. There's a lot of mixed messages, but there is wanting to clamp down on social media and redefine it. However, but it seems perfectly acceptable for them to allow in London and other parts of this country, with blatant support for terrorists such as Hamas and Hezbollah, marches up and down this country. And I profoundly disagree with that whatsoever. But no, they've allowed this. They've allowed people to sing from the river to the sea, and to then ask for the extermination of a nation and the genocide of a people group, which happens to be Israel and the Jews. That is out there. So there is a two-tier. People feel there's a two-tier policing. If one group of people go around marching and saying certain things, then no, we don't want to touch that, because we're afraid of actually challenging Islam when it's taken to that extreme. Yes. Then when a load of people that go along to maybe a Tommy Robinson march to support that, etc., etc., then we're all seen as far right. Everyone is seen as far right, and far right. Actually, no, we're not far right. We're just right, because it's common sense. And this is the rule of law. The rule of law is being undermined in this country. Now, people that are legal people have far more experience this than I do. But what we're now seeing, I believe, is the fact, and you have that on your side of the pond, the fact that we've got the judiciary who are politicized. And that began to happen without some of us realizing that, when Tony Blair came in 1997 and created a Supreme Court. So this is what we are saying. If we cannot throw illegal aliens out quickly or bang them to rights within 24 hours. But it seems that we can do that, and I'm not condoning the violence or certain behavior, but it seems that we can do that with working class white people of this country. We can bang them up in 24 hours, and we can organize a fast track judicial system. These are dangerous signs that, to me, speak of utter tyranny. And the next thing, it'd be like, as Alexander Solzhenitsyn, Gulag Archipelago. How far are we away from this kind of thing, where it says, we've had a situation where an ex-policeman was arrested for having wrong think. He was interviewed rather about having wrong think. This is where we've got. So people are then afraid to say things, Bob. This, I believe, is what is playing out.
Yeah, I think you're right. And to answer your question, how far away from that are we? I'd say about 20 days at the time of our conversation. About 20
Mm,
days here in the United States, anyway,
mm,
because that's when our election is. This is going to be dropped after that, of course. But um, I'm interested, Mark, about two things. You mentioned January 6th a couple of times. I want to come to that, and but you also mentioned Hamas and Hezbollah, and you have that Israeli flag behind you, along with the American flag as well.
mm.
So that's wonderful. Um, what role is the UK playing, if any at all, in aiding Israel and their existential battle against against Iran? Essentially, everything in Hezbollah, Hamas, the Houthis, they're all, Iranian funded and backed. What role? Because it seems as though we're the only. You mentioned the UK or UN before, and how we should get out of the UN, and I totally agree with that. The United Nations is overwhelmingly condemning Israel for defending itself. They blame Israel for virtually everything, and it seems like we're the only ally they have, which is even a little dicey now because I don't
Yes.
know how allied the Harris Biden administration really is with them. They seem to want to take Netanyahu out more than they want to protect innocent lives over there. But what's the UK's position on this, and how involved or not involved are they?
Well, the foreign secretary, there he is flying off, meeting various people in Israel. The last time he tried to do that, I think Netanyahu refused to meet him. I don't blame him. I don't blame him for saying I don't want to meet David Lammy. Our excuse of a foreign secretary is embarrassing. And there he is standing up saying we're going to stop sending little widgets that enable that benefit the Israeli Defense Force that may go in there, ammunitions or whatever. I mean, the amount of help that is to the Israeli is very, very small. But it seems to me it's like virtual signaling. It's virtual signaling. There are mixed messages. As soon as October the 7th happened, 2023, just over a year ago,
Mhm.
um, Sunak, who was then our prime minister, out there stood with Starmer, where they're condemning the violence. But you know as well as I do that within 24 hours, everyone was then telling Israel, don't retaliate, hold back. We haven't got enough time to go through the whole of Middle Eastern history, um, and what has happened there. But it is very, very important. Personally, we are giving extremely mixed messages, and I am not happy with that. We need to stand four square with them. That's it. Whatever people think, Israel is not just fighting for an existential threat against its own country, but it's actually fighting on behalf of all of us against for Western civilization. You are absolutely right that all the proxies. So let's just quickly remind ourselves of something, because this is really, really difficult when we start to look at history. So the Shah was overthrown in 1979, right? He's overthrown. And then Ayatollah Khomeini, and this is relevant to what all of that's going on. Ayatollah Khomeini is then in a flat in Paris and then is flown out. Well, thank you very much, Zygmunt Brzezinski, part of the Carter administration, foreign affairs, whatever department. Thank you very much for that, as you're playing out your chessboard and you are pushing forward the the Trilateral Commission's dream of beginning to build a utopian nightmare. Obama then, the nuclear bomb. Oh, we'll even things up. Why am I saying this? Well, there was a siege. There was a siege on the Iranian embassy. A poor policewoman got Yvonne Fletcher got shot, etc., etc. Iran before 1979 was a Western country. We could go into the coup led by the CIA in 1954, but we don't really have time to discuss that. The reason why I'm hinting at these things is I'm asking people to look at history. There's been this long game that's going on, and that is what is now playing out now. And Kamala Harris cannot say she backs Bibi Netanyahu. She cannot say it. She says the Israeli people. Now, in
She
Israel.
openly snubbed him. She openly snubbed him when he came
Absolutely,
to address Congress. Yeah.
absolutely. Now, um, the fact is that within Israel there are many people, because they voted for him, who are conservative. The interesting history of Israel moving from socialism into conservatism, how it is then founded, the whole elements of the kibbutzim, which is socialist collectivism, all these people working together. That's the dreadful attack on Kibbutzim Berry. It's at times it's rather complex in its founding, but it is absolutely fascinating, and we need to understand it. And I'll quickly say this: I believe firmly that as countries within the West, we need to be standing with Israel. And as a Bible believing Christian, I don't apologize for this. Genesis makes it very clear. If you will bless my people, I will bless you. If you curse my people, I will curse you. We have to have an understanding of that and an understanding of history. But they are defending Western civilization at the moment. How can you have tunnels all the way from Hamas regularly launching rockets? People think that Israel is colonialism. They think that that Gaza is an open prison. No, they left there, I believe, in 2003. Ariel Sharon, they retreated, which they shouldn't have done, in my opinion. And then, of course, if you then go back to various agreements before that Begin pushed forward under the Oslo Agreement, you then see that Yasser Arafat is speaking out of both sides of his mouth, and is explaining that basically within minutes we will ignore all this. Why am I saying this? We have a responsibility to understand history. We have a responsibility to understand what the political machinations are going on, because this, Bob, I make no apologies for this. This is a battle between good and evil, and this is a spiritual battle. That is how I see it. So, in 3 weeks' time, you're presented with this. Is one person perfect? No. Are we voting for another Messiah? No. However, do I want a communist Marxist to be running your country and looking at her lineage? No, I don't. But coming back to what you've said, we have got 5 members of parliament that were elected on a pro-Gaza ticket as an Islamic vote in our parliament. So you have the squad, don't you, or what they're
Yep.
called? I'm just trying to think of names.
We've got
You
a
have
handful
that.
of those very same pro,
Yes,
and not just Islamic, but Islamist, which is
you have
different.
it is absolutely
Pro-Islamists
is
who are
Islamist.
in the United States
Now,
Congress.
yeah, now this is Islam as a political ideology. That's it. That's what we have to accept. When we've got a situation where academics in France who have been studying the Muslim Brotherhood now have to have police protection 24 hours a day. And just that reminds me to say something about this and why we have all this mass immigration going on. Within the French Republic from 1962, because of their links with Africa, etc., there has been this focus to be pro-Arab. Now, comes down to oil most of the time, as it always does. That is what's gone on now. By 1973, within the common market, within Europe, you then have a European Arab dialogue to then promote the Arab countries. Now, in doing that, that would then mean that you then, over time, you'll then be promoting Islam. Okay? Now, some people may disagree. That's fine. But then look right now at the way the left also has been then joining with people with Islamists. If you can see that, and that then goes back to 1979, when the overthrow of the Shah, the left, the Islamists got together, and as soon as the Shah came, the Ayatollah, not the Shah, the Ayatollah Khomeini was then put in. They then killed all the members of the left. Why am I saying this? Because they are all using each other to create the tyrannical base. And what they've got to be very, very wary of is who is about to bite them on the backside. And Douglas Murray has written incredible books about this, Slow Death of Europe and all the rest, and War on the West. The talked about this. We are seeing, and he's been shouting and screaming for years about this. Bataillon wrote a book about Eurasia, raising and Israeli Jew, I believe, talking about this in regard to mass migration. It's being used as a weapon. We signed under Theresa May the Global Migration Compact, I think, round about 2018. I'm desperately trying to find a letter where a member of parliament said, oh, no, that's not going to have any effect on our nation. Really? I think there's another 300 bridges to sell you at that point. But this is where we're at. And we are being so dysfunctional in not standing up to tyranny. You cannot have 4,000 people come over a border, and how that happened is another subject, of Hamas coming over, killing 1,200 people, taking over 200 hostages and injuring many more people. You cannot have this. And then suddenly it's like, oh, don't react. Don't say this. And then have marches virtually every single Saturday for nearly a whole year in London, calling for a two-state solution. No, 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 no. And we are not standing up for what is right. But I will say this, I'll just end with this, Bob. There is a huge support in this country for Israel and for the Jewish people. And there are people like in America who had fled Europe, who managed to get out, and who are now over here. And of course, there's that long family historic memory. I would never have thought in my lifetime to see the appalling hatred on the streets of my own country. And we, in the past, when we have blessed the Jewish people, we've been really blessed as a nation. And now I just believe we are on an appalling tipping point, Bob.
I agree with that wholeheartedly. It's the bizarre part about that is here, and we don't have to go into it now because I want to get into J6 and some other current events, but the number of American Jews or Jewish Americans who support the party that is backstabbing Israel, or that is pretending to have Israel's back but is not actually there. And it sounds like you have the same thing there. There are a lot of Jewish Brits or British Jews, however you want to say it, that are not necessarily supportive of Netanyahu and supportive of Israel's fight. For, as you say, not just for their own existence but for Western civilization. They literally should have the support of all Western nations, and yet they don't. So that's a deep conversation that could go on a lot further. But I want to talk about January 6th because I know you're very, very vested in this. Even though you're on that side of the ocean, you have been watching and advocating for J6 defendants and trying to get the truth out there about what happened on that day. So I want to give you a little bit of latitude here to kind of talk about that from your vantage point and why this is so important to you. And then we're going to tie this to some news that I shared with you before we began recording a little bit earlier today about what they might be doing to prepare for a sequel to January 6th and how extraordinarily dangerous that can be. But tell me why J6 and the people who stormed the Capitol, as the narrative goes, in an attempt to usurp power or prevent the peaceful transition or transfer of power, that these insurrectionists did what they did, and why do you care? Mark?
Well, the bottom line is that, let's just say it, the election in 2020 was stolen. Period. It was stolen, right? And why do I care? It comes back to the leader of the president of the United States is seen as leader of the free world. Why do I care? I care because, as a dear friend of mine, David Summerall of StopHate.com, was there on January the 6th, and after us doing an interview on January the 8th, every single thing that he said unfolded. You had patriots, I believe over 1 million people attending, exercising their constitutional rights. You will be far more of a constitutional expert, Bob, than I am. We are a democracy, which is now mob rule. You are a constitutional representative republic with alienable rights. You are not a democracy. And the problem is that people have forgotten how your system runs. So on that day, people went peacefully to exercise their rights. There was no insurrection. As if you were wanting to have an insurrection, then why weren't people all dressed up in black, descending from ropes from Apache or Chinook helicopters at 3 o'clock in the morning? No, they were armed with Trump signs. They were armed with Old Glory. They were armed with singing. They were armed with the passion for their country and what it stands for. And your country and what it stands for and its constitution is unlike any other country in the world. That's why, we had a battle, we had war from 1776 for a few years in that regard, as you then fought for freedom. It's the biggest experiment on we the people in the history of the world. Why am I passionate about that? Is because, and even today, when I look at old congressional meetings that had one with Christopher Wray of the FBI, and then watching another Democrat lie about the death of Officer Signick, lie there. I will send you those links for you. Why? It's because you have then watched committees led, Liz Cheney, the other Adam Duda Shifty Shift, bloody blah, lie about what had actually happened. The fact that the President of the United States said, we will walk passionately, peacefully. And then they've said, oh,
Peacefully and
peaceful,
patriotically were his two,
peaceful,
and that was
thank you.
so important.
Peace,
Yeah.
yeah, peacefully and patriotically. And then everyone said, oh, he caused a riot. The fact that he had asked for the National Guard to come in, etc., etc. Why do I care about this? Is because literally in real time, and I say, and try and keep certain emotion out of it, when I'm seeing a dear friend of mine even go along to the congressional committee, which is David Summerall, not allowed to speak. And after him being a licensed investigator, going through thousands and thousands of hours on this and a real expert, and these people, and then suddenly, as he had been doing that, but soon after January the 6th, people were starting to be arrested, and the FBI turning up with 40-man crews with red dots all over people that they think were these insurrectionists and rioters. No, the fact that they may have gone into the building, the fact that they stood on the grass and prayed. You've got a grandmother who's actually on her knees praying and then gets arrested and put in prison for this. And at one point, I think now we're down to 300 arrests. Why do I care about this? Because, Bob, this should not be happening in America. It's not what it stands for. And then if you can't get it right, then God help literally the rest of us. It's what is actually that is what you represent. And again, I come down to it is people understanding history. A lot of Americans even now think that a group of people went along, caused a load of violence on January the 6th. It's taken so long. And that's why excuse the plug, the 1A Film Festival took place, 1afilmfest.com, and people soon can
Go
go
ahead and
and
throw
buy
that on
that.
the screen there if you could, Dylan. Yeah, let
Yeah.
people know what we're talking about there. And your short film from 2015, between Lambs and Lions.
Lambs and Lions, yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I want
we
to ask
showed
you
that.
about that too.
and the Iris Echo. It's not about me plugging products. I made things not realizing that actually, or a number of years later, they would be even more permanent, as I made a film talking about basically the Constitution of the United States being assigned to a museum. And that is why I'm passionate about it, because I could see that. If you read Pamela Geller's book, The Post-American President, which I did, I think in 2012, 13, I think when I read it, I'm not sure when it was published, maybe soon after Obama had become president or just before. If you read Trevor Loudon's work, The Enemies Within,
I have.
as
Yeah.
well, and his two books are just to the left of me. If you read Trevor's book and other investigation that he has done of the communist takeover, socialist takeover of politicians within your Congress, etc., people would be horrified. But that's because they've sat back and thought, well, everything's fine. There's nothing we can do. Well, that's why you have an an electoral college. Why am I passionate about this? Again, I say it because it's what you represent. I never thought I would see the day, right? And you might think this is a bit of an odd link, but to see the day when icons such as John Wayne, which I grew up on as cowboy films, being vilified. No, no, we can't have this. Is too, toxic masculinity and all this kind of thing. Seeing this wonderful, wonderful landscape that is your country up in Montana, etc., and Arizona, etc., etc., and all these Ford films. Why am I saying this? It's because it's about the fact that you as a country, and this is partly the problem, where it's about being self-sufficient. I don't want the government to interfere with my life. I want my, 150 acres. I want to be able to ranch here. I don't want to be disturbed. That has been exploited. That's been exploited because people then have become very disaffected with government. And now it's calling all of you within the context of the Constitution. And that is why people on Jan 6, you went to exercise your constitutional rights. You are allowed to do that. And then we look at Antifa, we look at all the BLM riots before, etc., etc. When patriots turn up, there isn't a literal piece of litter on the ground. They clear up. And just to clarify this, on Jan 6, they wanted more deaths. They wanted a Tiananmen Square. They wanted that on both sides. Now, to some people, that may sound OTT, and I'm quoting also. I'm not saying I'm clever enough to come to that conclusion straight away, but when my dear friend David Summerall said that, absolutely right. And now we know, because the way the police fired the smoke bombs and the rubber bullets into the patriot crowds first, round about 1:07, as one of David's films and documentaries, the timeline indicate, as Cruz was standing up with two other friends to have a go at Pence to say, how does this play out? Then 5 people died. And the fact that it's taken so many months to get the names out there, Bob, just shows you what we're dealing with in propaganda. And that will lead to that article that you want to touch on, that you then founded. And
You
I'm passionate about it because I'm seeing, like over here, we don't have to go into various ins and outs to the last 4 years, but we see the control. The control is real. I am passionate about it because I get very, very upset. And I know there's lots of people that see it. Lots of people do see it, but there's sadly lots of people who don't.
Yeah, I think we've come kind of almost full circle to the start of our conversation about what people in the other country, how invested they are in our elections, because it impacts you and them so
Mm.
directly around the world. But I want to go into, this is the third time now you and I have talked. We talked on a podcast called Stand and Deliver. I urge everybody to watch. It's Citizens for Free Speech. And then we talked on my radio program about your claim or your statement. I wouldn't even call it a claim because I agree with it, that they wanted a lot more people dead that day. They wanted to send a very strong message, and they wanted to essentially erase individual rights by erasing individuals. But they
Yes.
didn't. They killed a few people. Most people only know the name of one of them, maybe two. But that brings us to literally something that kind of just started to hit the news cycle today at the time of our conversation. There has been, and put this up on the screen if you could for us, Dylan, thank you. There has been a Department of Defense directive update to a directive that has been around before. It was updated in 2007, it was updated in 2016. And typically, DoD Directive 5240.01 that you see in front of you there is about, for example, the most recent one in 2016 was about intelligence and about intelligence gathering and about privacy for the people. This directive is largely the same, with the exception of a few specific items contained within this 22-page document that was released. And you can see it probably. Can you zoom that in for the audience? I see it fine where I am. There you go. You see it says this is effective September 27th, cleared for public release. That does not mean they were going to issue a press release to tell everybody about it. It just means it's there so they can't claim that we hid it. I think it's probably law, the law that says this has to be available to the public. But it was made effective September 27th. Now, if I count the days, that is about 5 weeks before the American election on November 5th. They updated and changed this Department of Defense directive to allow for, wait for this, to allow for the American military on American streets to kill American citizens if they deem it to be necessary, or in the view of the department or the Secretary of Defense, if he deems that it's in the interest of national security. This has never, ever been written before in a Department of Defense directive. Now, Dylan, I want you to scroll, if you would, to page 13 of this document, because I want to get Mark's response to this. And I also want everybody who's seeing it for the first time to know what we're talking about. Levels of authority, Secretary of Defense approval. If you go down to subsection 1 and then subset C. And in fact, I may read A and B as well. The decision to approve the request for these types of permissible assistance described in paragraph 3.2 to law enforcement agencies and other civil authorities are reserved to the Secretary of Defense. And as you can see, A, provision of personnel to support the response efforts for civil disturbances. Keep that in mind as we talk about J6, civil disturbances. DoD response to chemical, biological, radiological, nuclear, and high-yield explosive incidents. That's not really pertinent here, I don't think, but, and here we go. Subsection C, assistance in responding with assets with potential for lethality, or any situation in which it is reasonably foreseeable that providing the requested assistance may involve the use of force that is likely to result in lethal force, including death or serious bodily injury. It also includes all support to civilian law enforcement officials in a situation where a confrontation between civilian law enforcement and civilian individuals or groups is reasonably anticipated. Such use of force may be in accordance with DoD 5210.56, potentially as further restricted based on the specifics of the requested support. So that's a lot of kind of almost legalese type of jargon, but you understand what it says. And it's something that it did not say in 2016, the last time that particular directive was given an update. This allows for the military, the Department of Defense, to approve military forces to aid police, such as the Capitol Police, in essentially bringing about what you just said, Mark. And that is, they wanted a lot more dead on January 6th. This would give the military the approval and the permission and probably the order to do exactly that if they see a looming threat or an imminent threat in a confrontation with civilians.
Because
so I don't
January,
know. I tell you, it tells me 5 weeks away from an election that if there is another questionable election result and there are protests that happen as a result of it, those protests are going to be dealt with a lot differently than the way they were back in 2016.
And I share your concern because I totally share your concern, because Jan 6, taking prisoners turning up with massive SWAT teams and all the rest was about creating fear within the patriot conservative movement. That is what it was about. It's about creating fear that people are not going to go along and protest, because what's going to happen, we're going to find out, we're going to do a triangulation, find out you were there through your mobile phone, we'll then shut your bank account down, etc., etc. And if anyone doesn't think that the FBI weren't giving advice to the Canadian government in regard to the truckers, then I'll have more than a bridge to sell you as well. That is what was going on. There's a triangulation there from January 6th to the Canadian truckers to then the rest of the world. And I hear you very, very loudly on that, as in, well, let's just shoot people. No, we don't like what you're going to say. We just shoot you. Nancy Pelosi was recently over here, unfortunately, I think debating at the Oxford Union. She said words to the effect that basically saying that if people don't support the Democrats, don't support progressiveness, then they are, I think I'm being polite, then they are wrong. They need their head testing, etc., etc. And there
Yes.
she is saying that she was challenged on a few things. And then she kept, of course, kept using, I believe, the word democracy. And this is supposed to be someone that is in your political system, has been there for far too long. Maybe she needs that information to make money on the stock exchange. I couldn't possibly say. But the thing is, you are absolutely right. It's as though, no, we are going to change something. Look at how the FBI has been weaponized, Bob.
You used the word Tiananmen Square a
Yes.
short while ago, and
Mm,
they may be planning it. I mean,
mm,
like literally right there.
mm,
We will sacrifice X number of
mm,
Americans to
mm.
show Americans don't ever even think
Absolutely.
about stepping up against this government. This is literally the birth of tyranny, or maybe
Yeah.
it was born a while ago. It is developing. It is
I,
growing.
I,
It is being.
I, I totally and utterly agree with your concerns. And then what is, the fact that people do not understand their constitutional rights and to exercise them, they've been living off that. And then when people went and exercised that on Jan 6th, they knew this was coming. They then released the fact that we're now going to arrest all these people and create this tyrannical mindset. Thank you, Christopher Wray, who has spent so much money on Jan 6, where we should have been spending that on child trafficking and all the rest. I agree with you. I don't want to see this happen, Bob. And I'm not saying this to be clever. In fact, as I said, my dear friend David Summerall said this, and I went, "Oh my goodness, you are absolutely right." And now, so what does this mean? When we know, if we look at this, right? If you take Montana, well, I might have said this to you before, 50 out of 56 counties, 8 of those will be counting their ballots by hand. The rest won't be counting them by hand. I do not understand till this day. I practically had an apoplectic fit when I'm thinking, why haven't you all got hand counted ballots? And then if we even mention the Dominion voting machines or the pre-machines or that, or Smartomatic software, then someone would start throwing a legal suit. Well, I'm allowed to mention them. We cannot have, I don't believe it's right to use a digital system to count ballots. It all needs to be done by hand.
Well, and the interesting thing about the states is we are all individual states. And
Yes.
everybody has their own policy and their own procedure for
Mm,
doing that. I happen to agree with you. Many states have actually a combination thereof. There is a tabulator so that they can get an early, vote total so that they can kind of have an idea how it's going to come out. But then they also require the individual hand counting of everything to confirm that the tabulator got them right. So, and some states don't have that. Some states are much more lenient about just trusting the computers and the tabulators. But you're right. All of these things lead to questions. I won't even, you said very directly before the 2020 election here in the United States was stolen. I have said that before. But if I want to be a little bit more moderate in my approach here. I may just say there were a lot of questions. There were a lot of irregularities. It's something that JD Vance has, that's how he's answering it these days. When people continue to try to say, you and your party, did not even accept the results here. So how can you be taken seriously? And he said, look, there were a lot of questions. Things did not, necessarily get answered, properly. So if I'm being fair about this, I'll just say there were a lot of questions that were asked in 2020 that did not get answered. And they are now preparing for the very, very same thing. Maybe it'll be similar. Maybe it'll be in a different manner because obviously they did it the COVID way last time. So there was a ton more mail in ballots than have ever been used before, not counting absentee ballots. But whatever the method is, there are going to be protests over the results of this election. If Donald
Absolutely
Trump,
right.
if Donald Trump wins this election, the left is going to protest. Now, I doubt very seriously that there's going to be any concern about use of force, lethal force against them when they protest, but they're going to. And certainly if Donald Trump loses, especially if one or two or three of the battleground states have questions about, when they call a race, the vote totals changing suddenly and dramatically overnight when nobody else, when everybody stopped looking and when they were supposed to have
Mm,
stopped counting for the day. If
mm.
those things happen again, mark my words. Sorry about that. Mark my
Don't worry.
words. There are going to be more protests, and they're going to do everything they can to make
I
sure
couldn't
that
agree. I couldn't
there won't
agree
be
with
ever
more. And
protests again.
yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I'd encourage JD Vance next time he has that question thrown at him to then say, well, can we look how Lyndon B. Johnson was elected in 1954 and the ballot irregularities that were going on there? Can we look at that? Could we then go back to President Lincoln, where people were trying to get him off the ballot as he was running? Can we talk about that? I'm not saying that to be clever. What I am saying is that there is shenanigans of precedents
Yes.
that people will not look at, and that's why I come back to it, to look at history, to look at what has gone on before. This is really, really important. This is really important to find out why people like Ron Paul, on your TV, where they're going, well, Ron Paul is, fourth, maybe third. In fact, he's second. They're playing with this. They're playing with the American people all the time.
No question.
And then you go back to other independent runners. You go back to all of that. You could go back to Ross Perot, etc., etc. It's fascinating to look at this. It really is. And that's why, sadly, as you would agree, it costs so much money to then run a presidential campaign, because they would like that. The two parties would like that because they want to keep out all these very, very clever independents. But I just ask people to really look at history. Thank you for what you've said about how individual states do it, and we need pollsters out there. We need people to be out there, and I just want to give a really important shout out here. There recently, the amazing woman, I believe, I'll just get her name right, otherwise it'd be so embarrassing. I think it's Tina Peters. Tina Peters has been given a 9-year sentence because she took her responsibility properly, full-heartedly, in checking how votes were being counted, how the election in her district under her authority was being laid out. And she did every single thing right. She took copies to say, these are the anomalies. And she has been given a 9-year prison service. A lady who is a gold star mother, because sadly her son was killed in action. This is how we are treating people. And if people do not believe me, they don't have to agree with what I'm saying. I'm asking you to go and do the research. Look up this
Look it
brave
up.
woman who turns around and says, excuse me, I am not happy with this. It's a bit like, I think, in Maricopa County, where it's a case of, leave your ballots over there. Don't worry. We will make sure they go through the machine for you. Excuse me. Do they think that the American people that were standing in line that day are absolutely thick and stupid? They must do. No, they're not. They stood there for hours, and of course they were made to stand there for hours, so they get frustrated. You have got to make sure you've got posters. Take a picture of your vote, whatever, just to make sure that you're there supporting each other to get the vote out.
Of course, you're not allowed to take out your camera phones in the voting area, though, so that you
Mm,
cannot take pictures to make sure that you can verify your own ballot in the event
mm,
that it is not counted. So, and to answer your question, Mark, as we wrap this up, I don't think that they think all of the people are stupid and thick. I think they believe that a certain population of them can be. Oh, just trust us. And they're like, okay, you told us so. But I think the other part of it is there is just so much brazenness that they say, even if you're not stupid and you know we're doing something to you, what are you going to do about it? And the answer to that question is the Department of Defense directive that I just shared with you. You're not going to do a damn thing about it. There's nothing you can do about it. Just shut up and take it. And
yeah.
that's what they used. That's what they said a long, long time ago when our two countries had a little bit of a disagreement with one another, and it led to something extraordinary. I hope we don't ever have to go back to that again. But that is the reality of it. They're challenging the people and saying there's nothing you can do about it, and we'll see if the people agree. Mark Sutherland, I want to tell everybody to follow your YouTube channel. Make sure that you follow that. Mark is on Twitter as well. You see the address on the screen. His link to his film at the 1A Film Festival between Lions and Lambs, that is available too. You should watch that. And Mark, keep up the good work. Keep shining a spotlight on tyranny as it grows, because it's the only way we can stand up and push back against it is if we know it's there. So keep up that great work, and thank you for coming on.
Bob, it's an absolute pleasure, and thank you for allowing me to do so.
It's a pleasure. All right, that's going to do it for Strictly Speaking. If you enjoyed this episode, if you found value in what you heard from our guest, Mark Sutherland, and how could you not, please make sure you share this. Give us a like wherever you're watching this. If you're watching it on Rumble or on YouTube or listening on Spotify, give us a like and a follow, and make sure to hit that alert button so that you can be notified the next time we drop another episode of Strictly Speaking. We'll see you next time.